Topo is a surrealist, avant-garde Western film that came out in 1970 that's written and directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. So Alejandro Jodorowsky is a filmmaker that in the past year or so I've discovered and I have really taken a liking to. I haven't seen all of his films or anything like that, but I have seen both Santa Sangre and The Holy Mountain, and both of those films I would just consider to be creme de la creme cinema. And both of those films really embrace one of the crucial things that I personally really love and enjoy out of the art of filmmaking. And the last personal favorites video that I made, I put The Holy Mountain, I think, in the top 4, top 5. But I don't really have much chances to talk about Santa Sangre either. And that film is also just really incredible. And honestly, it can arguably be, at least out of the ones that I've seen so far, his best film objectively, just because that film has more of a cohesive narrative. Because out of all the films that I've seen, including El Topo, which I promise I'll get into in a second, they're not narrative films. Like, they're films that focus solely on symbolism, themes, metaphors. It's like each scene of the film is really solely concerned with representing a certain theme and conveying some sort of symbolic message to the audience, usually through the most like wild, vile, and just really out there kind of way. But let's just start talking about El Topo specifically, because that's what y'all clicked on this video for. El Topo has a really interesting history behind it, because it came out in 1970 and it essentially created the whole like midnight movie culture type thing, because it was just so like out there and weird and artistically ambitious and graphic and exploitative that it really didn't cater to the normal moviegoer. So basically, they would only play this film at midnight at certain art house cinemas, kind of the same way like porn was played in theaters too. They would only play it like really late at night. And same with other films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was also a film that they would play just like either like in a porn theater, but it would only play at midnight for the real treacherous art film lover audience. And El Topo was really known for that, and it really became a cult classic. And this is the film that really kind of put him on the map. I don't mean on the map in the sense that like Alejandro Jodorowsky like made it into the mainstream or anything like that, but he became a familiar name in the art house community, and people started to kind of know who he was just because this film really appealed to, again, the really kind of adventurous art house film lover. I mean, it even got to the point where John Lennon himself from the Beatles was touting this movie and was, telling people to go watch it and how much he enjoyed it. And yeah, that's also a whole other story with The Holy Mountain. Apparently George Harrison was supposed to play the lead role in The Holy Mountain, but he didn't want to show his asshole or something like that, and Jodorowsky, as the uncompromising, art film director that he is, just refused to compromise on that, which he later said that he totally regrets and he should have used a body double. Anyway, I'm so far off on the topic. So yeah, with El Topo having a lot of this really intriguing history behind it, I was really interested to see how this film would actually like hold up today, because when I saw The Holy Mountain, I was like, wow, like this film is going to be timeless. Like anybody could watch this film at any point and just be absolutely blown away despite all the imagery and all the ambition that they're seeing. And now that I've seen El Topo, this film is one of those films where, in my opinion, it has a lot to offer intellectually. But for me personally, it's one of those films that I thought was funner discussing it rather than actually sitting through it. It's one of those films that's funner to react to and talk about than actually making yourself sit down and watch the entire thing, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of reasons for that, but let me explain things that I really enjoyed out of this film, which is essentially everything that I usually enjoy out of a Jodorowsky film. Just the artistic edge to this film, and the amount of effort that he puts into every scene of this film in terms of all the symbolism that he's trying to convey, and all of the allegorical stuff in this film, and even some of the aesthetic work as well. Like, he uses the aesthetics to definitely convey a certain emotion and theme as well. You have to commend him for it, and you have to give him some respect for it, because every scene of this film you could analyze, because every scene really is that artistically bizarre and ambitious. Pretty much every single scene of this film you could talk about and react to with your friends if you watch it with them. But if you're looking for a film that has like a cohesive narrative that you can follow, that has some sort of relatable conflict to it, pretty much if you're looking for a normal ass movie that has a somewhat conventional narrative that's trying to get you to follow, you probably are not gonna really be all that interested in this film. You probably won't like it. I've actually seen a lot of reviews, people just absolutely trashing this film, saying that this is like one of the worst films that they've ever seen. And honestly, even though I appreciate it and I enjoyed it quite a bit, I can definitely understand where people are coming from when they say that this movie is not good at all. And it's only because this film focuses so much on just conveying themes and symbolisms, and the entire thing is basically a giant allegory as well. But, everything is so focused on spirituality, sexuality, finding oneself, violence, just the kind of worst part of humanity is also in this film. Even with sexes and gender, it also goes into that. Basically, this film is incredibly philosophical and incredibly spiritual as well, but every scene is really just trying to send a message or satirize or criticize something regarding philosophical subjects. And there's not that narrative there to really attach yourself to, so somebody going into this expecting some sort of narrative is probably going to be really disappointed, because there's not much of it there. I mean, it's there, don't get me wrong, it's there in some way. This isn't just like a montage of like random images. It's there's a narrative, but it's definitely not concerned with it nearly as much as it is with what Jodorowsky is trying to convey with all of his artistry in this. Another thing about this film is that it really gained a lot of traction back in the 1970s just because of how outrageously violent and graphic it was. There's a lot of talk about the nudity in this, the sexuality in this, the bloody violence in this, and it really got a lot of people talking about the film. And I remember going into this hearing so much about a certain rape scene in this film, and when I could tell that the scene was about to occur, it really wasn't all that bad. Like, it was actually the rape scene, I guess if you really want to call it that, was filmed in the most artistic way that I think I've ever seen a rape scene be filmed, because it doesn't really show it. Like, it doesn't really show anything like that's really graphic. But it uses imagery to kind of, again, to try to convey a theme or emotion out of it. And I was really impressed by that because, as someone who has seen Gaspar Noé's Irreversible, nowhere near the way that Gaspar Noé shot that scene. Totally different angle. And I thought it was really interesting because I had heard so much controversy about it, but going into it, I didn't see anything really that controversial about it. And I thought it was incredibly creative the way it was shot, honestly. But as far as the bloody violence goes, I think that some of it holds up and some of it doesn't. There's a lot of like the violent stuff in this that is either edited really choppy and really awkwardly, and you don't really get, at least in my opinion, I didn't really get the impact that much from it. And it's just because it's made in 1970. Of course, it's going to age to some degree. But since there's so much acts of violence in this film, not all of it is really going to hold up the way that I guess you would want it to. And but there are some, in terms of a lot of the gunshot stuff, where I was actually impressed at how much it did hold up, because there were some scenes in this film where I was like, how did they shoot that? Because like there's a lot of gunshot scenes where he would shoot somebody and you would see like, you would see the bullet leave the gun, and then you would see the impact of it hit someone's body. Either they're just really good with timing or they pulled some sort of trick. I'm not sure. But it was actually really impressive because when it came to those scenes, I was like, oh, that actually holds up really well. There were also a handful of scenes in this film that had to do with animals and animals dying. And I'm pretty sure that they legit killed some animals in this film. I'm not sure. I gotta look more into that. But you could get away with a lot in the 1970s. And it seems to me that they got away with killing some animals in here. And I don't think I'm all the way on board with that, obviously. As someone who really wants to be an artist and is an aspiring filmmaker, I personally, even if I had the freedom, I would not go to that lengths to do that. I could find a whole other way. But, you know, either they did kill some animals here, or they did an incredible job at creating the illusion that they did. But, yeah, that aside, as far as the violence goes, some of it holds up, and some of it doesn't. By the way, I totally forgot to mention that this stars Alejandro Jodorowsky himself as the main character, and he also casts his son in this film that is apparent in the film for at least the first 30 minutes or so. And there was also a lot of controversy around the fact that his son is literally butt-ass naked in this film, and he's butt naked for, again, like the first 30 minutes of this film, and, you know, that's also problematic. I can see why people would be kind of upset about that. You know, considering the fact that the kid can't even really consent if he wants his, you know, body to be exposed in that way. So again, like as somebody who wants to be an aspiring filmmaker, I don't think I would go that far and do shit like that. Even if, because today you can't even do shit like this. Like, this is definitely a practice and exploitation of the rating system. Sure, it's exploitative in a way that seems like it's kind of gratuitous, but at the same time, it does feel like he used exploitation to really push the boundaries of his own artistic integrity. And so it's not exploitation just for the sake of exploitation. It's definitely there because he wanted to really use all of his artistic liberties and put them all on the table. But in terms of what I have used my kid and just put him butt naked on the screen like that for a long time, I don't think I would have. Does it work metaphorically? Does it work as a form of symbolism? Sure, it does. It works, and it's thought-provoking. But would I have done that? No, I wouldn't. But one thing about this film that I personally thought was an issue was actually its length, because it's a little bit over 2 hours. And don't get me wrong, I've seen, you know, recently I saw Love Exposure. That was a 4-hour film. If you haven't seen my review on that, please check it out. But it's not the fact that it's a 2-hour film that bugs me. It's the fact that I feel like this easily could have been like an hour and 30-minute film, an hour and 45-minute film. And you would have relatively got the gist. You would have got the same impact. Sure, a handful of the symbolism wouldn't have been there, but in terms of the entire allegorical aspect and all of the metaphors that are already on the table, I think that it would have kept my engagement more, because this film does hit a point, like around like the hour and a half point, where like I was not getting bored, but I felt like this film was really being too demanding of the audience in terms of their engagement. And I thought, like, you know, if maybe you could trim up quite a bit of the stuff, it would have made it not as dragging, and it definitely would have kept my engagement, my full engagement, a lot more if maybe it didn't run over a little 2 hours long. But what's also really interesting is that this film feels incredibly psychedelic, trippy, and surreal, but without the use of colors that are usually associated with that genre of filmmaking, or just with that type of mindset in general. Like, this film isn't full of all these like crazy wonderful colors and a lot of like bending and distortion of the scenes or anything like that. Like, it doesn't have anything like that, but just the imagery alone and the kind of settings that are in this film, because there's a lot of things that don't match with the setting. Like, there's a lion in this film, even though they're in the middle of the desert. There's white bunnies in this film, which also doesn't really make the most sense. There's a lamb, you know, randomly, like in this well in the middle of the desert. And this film just feels like a weird, like, acid trip, but without really using colors and the kind of psychedelic aesthetic to really enhance that feel. But when you're watching it, you can't help but think, like, what the hell am I watching? Like, you feel like you're on acid watching it. Not that that's something new to Jodorowsky, because The Holy Mountain is, like, on a whole other level. It uses everything. It uses the colors. It uses the aesthetic imagery. It uses the subject matter. It uses the themes. It uses everything to really give you that crazy psychedelic feel. But this film also achieves that in a way, but without using a lot of the psychedelic colors and imagery that you would see in a film like The Holy Mountain. But that being said, even though I enjoyed and appreciate the journey that this film gave me, I think that, and if I'm comparing it to the rest of his work, the imagery didn't really resonate with me as much as it did in The Holy Mountain and even in Santa Sangre as well. And again, like, I feel like overall this film is maybe a little bit more demanding of your patience than both The Holy Mountain and Santa Sangre. But this film is still incredibly bizarre, incredibly out there, and films like this definitely influenced other filmmakers like David Lynch and even Nicholas Winding Refn as well. Because I forgot to mention, there's a scene in this film that reminded me a lot of the fight scene in Only God Forgives. You know, that fight scene where Ryan Gosling tries to fight God, essentially, but you just can't lay a hand on him because God is just, like, dodging all the shit. There's a scene like that in this film. And considering that Refn and Alejandro Jodorowsky are, you know, they're pretty close. Like, they're actually close friends, I believe. And I think Refn's the only one that's ever read the entire Jodorowsky's Dune, like, book that he made, which is really interesting. But when I saw that scene in my head, I'm like, Refn had to have got inspired by that and put that in Only God Forgives, because it was incredibly similar in terms of the approach and even the themes. But yeah, even though there are plenty of aspects of this film that I wasn't too huge on and really wasn't a fan of, this film is certainly unlike pretty much anything you've ever seen, unless you've seen another Jodorowsky film. And it still offers a lot in the art department. It's incredibly ambitious. And this film is still going to hold up in a cult classic type of way, where it's just so bizarre and out there that people are still going to be gravitating towards this film just to be able to say, like, hey, I've actually seen this film. Have you seen it? And it's a really incredible art discussion piece. Like, this is a film that you're definitely going to be talking about after it's done, regardless if you love it or hate it. So I'm going to give El Topo an 8 out of 10. It's funny because once this film ended, I thought to myself, I'm like, this is like a 7 out of 10. Like, this is at most a 7.5. Like, that's what I was thinking when this film ended. But it just, I was able to sit with it more. And I was thinking a lot about what I saw. And like I said, and like I mentioned earlier in this review, like, this is a film that I think gets a little bit better once you just start thinking about everything you saw and really start discussing it with other people. And it's a film that if you just let it sit with you for a little bit, it might grow on you. And I think there's something a little bit special if a film is able to do that. Now, at that point, I was just like, fuck it, you know, I'll give it an 8 out of 10 because I feel like it deserves it in the sense that it just really gets you talking about it. It really gets you thinking. And, you know, especially for the time it came out in, incredibly bizarre. And once you're done watching this film, unless you've already seen another Jodorowsky film, I promise you've never seen a film like this, regardless if you hate it or love it. But anyways, that's all I got to say about El Topo. If you want to participate in the next patron poll, because this is the one that actually won the last patron poll, all you gotta do is pledge $1 to my Patreon and you'll get full exclusive voting power and you'll be able to perhaps decide the next film I watch. So please give that a shot and I will love you forever. And if you have any requests for any film that you want me to review, please let it be known in the comment section, because it doesn't matter if you pledge anything, I will still make sure everybody's recommendations will have a chance to get into the patron poll. So thank you all very much for hearing what I had to say about El Topo. If you really enjoyed what I had to say, please give this video a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.